welcome back. So there I was. I'm your host again, Travis Womack. Today's guest is none other than Michael Brown, a connection I made on LinkedIn, and I am loving LinkedIn for being able to meet random people and random veterans that have unique and different experiences. As I say, we all can join. Experiences may vary. Michael, I think, is definitely in that department, being in the Air Force for a little while, and none other than a plumber in the Air Force. So we're in for a treat today. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
So what I'd like to do with every guest is just kind of give you the opportunity to tell everybody when you joined, why you joined, and if there's yours is a little bit more previous than 9/11, so we'll have a different reason today.
Yeah, so my father was 30 something years in the Air Force, watched the scopes for a while, and then he was in charge of Air Force recruiting. And I never thought I would join the Air Force. And my girlfriend got pregnant,
No, oh,
and
really?
there was no health care.
Yeah.
So I actually chose to join the Air Force in a really strange story to make people laugh. And like, wow, I called my dad. He was in Chanute, I think, up in Illinois, and he got me into the system and got it all set up. So on Monday morning, I went into Colorado Springs. I forgot the lady's name now, but she was a master sergeant. And she said, "You look a little bit like Chief Brown." I said, "Well, that would be my father." She goes, "I heard you were coming in." So long story short, I went ahead and did my ASFAB and did all those things. But there were just in 1980, when I went into delayed enlistment, there were no openings at all. There just weren't. Well, they finally offered me a time to come in. They said, "You can be a cook, a cop, or a plumber." And I said, "Well, I am not going to be a cop, and why not?" I said, "I don't want to be a cook anymore." So I said, "I'll try plumbing. That's a pretty cool thing to do."
Yeah.
So they gave me a date to come in. I went in, went down to Shepherd Air Force Base. Oh, no, Lackland Air Force Base, sorry. And then the craziest thing happened on day one. Went there that night. The next morning, they have this little chiefs area where all the technical sergeants are. And I remember got my hair cut and everything, and wearing
Oh
my
yeah.
uniform and everything. And I got invited over there to talk to a bunch of senior enlisted advisors. Now, these are all the senior enlisted advisors that my dad knew, right? So they had to just razz me a little bit. And I remember my tech sergeant Risby was his name, and he said, "Okay, who are you? Who is your father? Am I going to have a problem with you?" Because he just wasn't sure why I was called out. I said, "Well, I'm just Airman Brown, sir." "Well, who's your father?" I said, "My father's Chief Brown." He said, "Well, why did these chiefs?" I said, "Well, they've known me since I grew up." So they thought it was pretty neat that now they've got me down here. So long story short, left Lackland, went to the um, technical school and started my career as an Air Force civil engineer.
That's crazy. Where all have you been stationed at?
So I didn't get stationed that much. Got stationed more with my father, and then I
Hmm.
can tell you other stories about the bases that I visited.
Yeah.
But I started off at the craziest thing was the Air Force Academy. So I
Oh wow.
come from Colorado Springs. The chances to go to the Air Force Academy in 1982 were slim and none.
Yeah.
We were the first enlisted people left brought in there as airmen. Before you all had to be senior NCOs because they were afraid we would corrupt the cadets.
Fair.
But what happened is we started to have to plow for snow. We had to do standby. It's a big, big base. The Air Force Academy, I'm sure if you've been in Colorado Springs, there's a lot of real property. There are a lot of things
Oh yeah.
happening. So went there and I had the most amazing leadership that let me learn things about civil engineering, about computers, about estimating, programming, budgeting, and things like that. So it was just a great tour. And as I'm wrapping up my 4 years, I guess, I decided that I would go get my short tour out. So I went to Kunsan Air Force Base, Korea from
Oh wow.
86 to 87. So that was really cool. They called that the Coon. And then I left there and went to Luke Air Force Base. And that was the last duty center. I actually separated at Luke in June or July of the 90s, so just before, I think, the war that started in the 90s.
Yeah, just before the Desert Storm hit. Oh, you're just a hair older than me.
Yep.
I was in fifth grade watching that on TV. So
Yeah.
that's crazy. It's I've had a lot of guests that are obviously more war on terror era, and and I always find it interesting talking to people that were basically pre 96 because like everything changed. The internet kind of became a thing, started to 95, 96, and then obviously iPhone and everything else just changed everything. But being in Korea in the late 80s, what was that like as far as like calling home and
It
writing a
was
letter and it's
crazy.
weeks
So,
later?
no, you know what was neat is I actually got a, computer that I brought with me.
Oh, really?
And I started writing letters electronically because I had really bad handwriting. And I would send out letters, and about a week later, I would get letters back. So they actually moved mail pretty well through there. And I just didn't feel like getting drunk. Went to church, went running quite a lot, but just had a great tour there. It was a really neat tour. They took it very, very seriously.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we were really comfortable with China or North Korea at that time.
Well,
So,
the
the Air
dad
Force for
was
what they
still
do
alive, wasn't
did.
he?
Huh?
What, Kim, the dad was still alive.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
father was alive.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's cuckoo for cuckoo puffs. So
Yeah.
that's
But
crazy.
that was a great tour. It was a fantastic tour.
Because I had a unique thing growing up as far as like computers and having access to them. My granddad was an IBM Tandy when I was 8, and we're building it, and there's cables everywhere. There's 400 boxes, and it took 6 disks to save one, Word file before there was a Word file and everything,
Yeah.
and all this fun stuff. And I remember I used to handwrite letters to my grandparents and fax them to them. And that was like the coolest thing in the world was to send a fax to my grandparents, and I was like 11. So
That's
it's
really cool.
it's a different world now though. I find it, where's Luke Air Force Base at? Or is that gone now?
Luke is in Phoenix, outside of Phoenix, so it's
Okay.
in Glendale, Leachfield.
Okay. There's people don't realize that I know there's the key names, obviously, Dias and, all that stuff is, being in Texas, everybody knows where Dias is pretty
Right.
much. But there's a lot of bases that are way up north that are like in the middle of nowhere and turn left. So,
Oh, true, true. Or
so
SAC, right, where they put all the missiles.
yeah, exactly. So, get there
Yeah.
in the middle of North Dakota or Iowa or you're out there and just
Yep.
trying to figure it all out. And so what was the civil engineer on the Air Force Academy is probably a pretty unique experience as far as learning. Like you already stated getting to learn some stuff, but because I'm sure your cadre or your leadership, a little bit of both were, probably all very well educated in those things and probably instructors in their own right. Talk a little about that.
Oh, they were. So I wasn't an instructor. I wasn't a student. I was
Right,
permanent party there.
right,
So I
right,
was taking care of the base itself, right?
right.
And yeah, we had the most senior elite people. We had what I call burners. So we had, a lot of people were making E5 very, very quickly, very young chiefs. But senior leadership was extremely strong. So were all the base civil engineers and the deputy base civil engineers. And then it was a great place too, because I don't know if you like college football, but I followed the Air Force Academy
Oh yeah,
Falcons. So every game day, I would go there and take care of all the plumbing. It was a very big stadium. I'd have to make sure everything was good. Got in for free, watched the game, started following them.
that's
And
awesome.
then I met some of the coaches. So I used to travel with the Air Force Academy every weekend
That's
that I could
awesome.
travel with them. I travel with them, which is just amazing. I'll just tell you what happened. So I'm not sure if you follow Army or not, but back
Yeah.
then, Air Force was killing Army, killing Navy. We beat Notre Dame 5 years in a row.
Wow. I did.
Four
I was
years, I apologize, 4 years in a row. 4 years in a row, the Academy Falcons beat Notre Dame.
that's near the Lou Holtz years too, so that's saying something.
That was pretty cool. But had a lot of really nice jobs that I was able to do there that I was put in charge of as like an E4 or an E5 and started to learn how to do cost estimating and budgeting and planning and making sure that all the materials were brought to the job so everything would be there for the crews that were doing the work.
That's awesome. How do you feel that's helped you to today?
Well, then my story gets pretty unique in that I got moved from Korea to Luke Air Force Base. And when I went there, I was going to work in the shops, but I really didn't want to work in the shops. And I was going to work on this truck they call a do it now truck. So they put a plumber, an electrician, and maybe a painter and a carpenter. You just go out and do small little jobs. Well, there was this brand new type of a contract called SABRE, Simplified Acquisition of Base Engineering Requirements. And what they did with that is they had a price book of 20, 30,000 line items. And you would use that book to build estimates with the contractor that was hired for 5 years.
Hmm.
So when I got there, they said, "Do you know how to estimate?" I said, "Absolutely." They said, "Okay, well, here's a bunch of books. Can you go estimate?" I'm like, "Okay. Well, what do you have for software or anything?" "We don't have any software. We just have all these forms right here, or a typewriter, or
Good
you can
luck.
write down." Because then all my counterparts were all architects, so they had that beautiful handwriting, and I had horrible handwriting. So I would build my estimates, and I couldn't read them the next day. Actually, on a piece of paper, I just had
Oh no.
horrible handwriting. So I talked to my leadership and I said, "Hey, I wrote a software program. Would you allow me to write one with the commercial programmer? And then we could use it here internally with the 3 or 4 people that are in our shop." Because we were starting to do about, I think about $3 or $4 million a year worth of work, which is a lot of work back then.
Yeah.
And what it was is all the work that needed to be done that couldn't be done, or the jobs that needed to be done, you could run it through this contract. So it was very unique. Second one, I think, in the Air Force that was started there. And I stuck with that for a while. And then, unfortunately, as a single parent, when I went to Korea for a year, my wife decided she didn't want to be my wife anymore. So I became a single father of two in the Air Force, which was really unique in the Air Force to have a man that was responsible for children while
Right.
he was in the Air Force. And it just wasn't working out. And we weren't, I don't know when we went to Desert Storm. Was that 91?
I think it's 91. Yeah, my memory's
Yeah,
it's fifth
91.
grade for me.
So
Yeah.
didn't hear about it. There was no pre stuff, but I just said, I'm going to get out. So I went to my leadership and said, "Hey, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go back to Colorado Springs. I'll figure out something to do." And my base commander said, "Why don't you stay in Sabre? You wrote a little software program for us. You understand this really well. It's going to grow in the Army. It's going to go in the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. Working for a contractor, that doesn't sound like a great thing to do," because I had an anti-contractor kind of a
Right.
thought. But I did, and I worked for an amazing, very small company that brought me in and gave me a great opportunity. And I started to continue to develop software. And a small little story, what happened is they went from 3 contracts doing maybe 15 million a year to, in about 5 or 6 years, they had 40, 50, 60 contracts, a bunch
Wow.
of offices doing hundreds of millions of dollars. So
Right.
they what I would call blow up. And it was a software that I developed for them and with the teams that I had that made a lot of that possible. And I started to really craft my trade. So here's where it gets kind of interesting. We talked about military bases.
Yeah.
So in 2001, they got purchased by a couple of different companies, and I didn't want to be there anymore. So I quit, moved back to Colorado Springs, and I started my own company called 4 Clicks.
Hmm.
And what I did is I developed the software that owners, contracting, or Department of Public Works, or the Navy or the Air Force, they could use that as well as contractors. And I was very, very blessed to grow a business to about 95% of the Air Force.
Wow.
So when you talk about military bases, I've been to every single Air Force base, including many that closed with BRAC,
Wow.
with the exception of Maelstrom and I also, every other one I physically went to, which was a
Wow.
pretty cool thing to do. So
That's
sold
crazy.
my company in 2017 and retired, and that's kind of what happened at that point.
That's crazy. I grew up in West Texas, a little town called Big Spring, and they had Webb Air Force Base there for, gosh, a long time. I think it closed down in 76 or 77 or somewhere in there because I know my entire life it was everybody just knew the Air Force Base. It's all the barracks are prisons now. They're like minimal security prisons,
Sure.
but
You're right.
the runway still works and it's all, private little Cessnas and whatnot. But it's they're out there. That's a crazy story. The people that jumped on, you know, the late 80s and early 90s that saw, hey, understanding the back then writing code was, C colon slash slash, you know, MS DOS, if you could remotely grasp that and get going, you could launch something and go. There was a lot of resistance to, you know, oh, this technology is not going to go anywhere. Because
Right.
I joined in '03, and I remember very well, and it was kind of where it all ended, but my leave form when I left basic training, was still done on carbon paper.
Right.
And
Yellow, pink, and whatever the
yeah,
color was.
whatever in the black and the black sheet in the middle, and it was, I'm like, I remember getting that and being like, I just came from college and where I did everything on, a desktop and, big old monitor and stuff. But I get there, I'm like, what are we doing? This is, and then we try to draw weapons out, and they're like, okay, it's like this massive, ridiculous process to like hand write these specific forms and hand receipts to draw. I'm like, I got a computer that has Excel. This is
Right.
this is this is
Right.
dumb. So I remember doing the same thing, and I found the form on the Army's. You can download any DA form stuff, or I'm sure AF has the same thing, and um, downloaded it and like it's a PDF. Like we can type in this. Why are we handwriting all of this? This is stupid.
Right.
And so I had this pre-done thing of every single weapon had a form already done. All I had to do is just put the name in and hit print, and they could sign it. And so like our weapons draw was always much quicker. And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, how'd y'all figure that out?" I'm like, "It's called Adobe. It's not that. This is not
Right.
rocket science." But now it's obviously now we have a whole entire cyber you gosh, Army Cyber is a huge unit now up in Maryland. So, and they understand code a lot better than I do. But it's
Yeah.
there's a period of time there, about 12 years, where you could excel really quickly if you understood how to use a computer.
Yeah, I had a really great guy. I got $5,000 was what's called a Form 9 back at Luke, and was I told him I can get a product written. They said, "How do you know that?" I said, "Because I'll find a programmer." So I
Yeah,
opened up the yellow pages. The first one was Alt Sol for ALT Sol for Alternative Solutions. Called him up. He's been a friend ever since then.
that's
Wrote the
awesome.
program. And it's funny because I tried to tell the Air Force that they needed to keep that program and spread it out to all the other bases. And they go, no, no, no. We've got these forms and we've got all that stuff. We won't need it. But hey, you did a good job. And then look what happened back in 2006, 2007. I sold my software to about 95% of all the Air Force. But
Yeah, the Army.
yeah, computers were amazing. We used them in Korea too.
Yeah,
Um, so the people that understood how to do DOS is exactly what you said. Not
yeah,
Windows. Windows wasn't
yeah,
happening
yeah,
yet, but they could write some very productive products.
yeah. It was my granddad was teaching. I think I was 7 or 8. My brother was like 10 or 11, somewhere in there. And I remember very well because I was in my bedroom in this little loft room that I lived in. And we had this table and we built that computer. And, that was when they had the old wide, like 2 inches wide cables, that had to go from drive to drive. And it was
Oh
all,
yeah.
all on the outside. And this monstrosity of a thing is in my room. Now that I'm a parent of a 7-year-old, I'm like, what were my parents thinking? This this crazy, crazy contraption, right next to my GI Joes, and but he taught me and my brother how to do, the basic MS DOS, and
Hmm.
my brother for some reason he could hear that stuff and it just made sense. And he's a professional programmer, and I mean he's been doing it for years, writing code and all kinds of nonsense. It's funny you talk about ordering things though. I'm just gonna roll over here and grab this without pulling my computer to the ground. So when I was in the old guard, um, the cannons there are really really old, right? And the salute battery, and they have it looks great, but it's a semi Frankenstein system because the wheelbase isn't designed for the cannon that's on. It's a 105 howitzer cannon, but it's on a different platform to make it street legal because we don't. They actually have real wheels instead of the combat wheels. And
Okay.
but then the rounds, 105 is obviously for combat, but anywhere in the world, or in the US at least, Texas A&M or Air Force Academy, West Point, any of these schools that use a cannon that fires whenever they score a touchdown, they all use the exact same round. It's an 80 millimeter blank. And so I actually have one. So it's one of these. And
Oh
so
wow.
they all, there's just goes boom. But um the problem was is that you have a 105 hole and then 80 millimeter round. So they had to put this adapter in there in the breech to hold the smaller round. Well, the problem was is the extractor is, doesn't it didn't reach because the round's smaller. And so they kind of had to figure it out. And so this little piece right here, was this used to be just a flat. So this would the round would go in, and then this would pull it out. And but this didn't exist. Well, and not this version. Everything up to this was the exact same. And so I told my boss, I'm like, I so I went on we have this thing called oh, my brain just turned off. It's not GCS Army. It's basically Walmart.com, but for the military. That's the only way I can describe
Okay.
it. You have to have a certain account, you have to use a government credit card and stuff. And so I went on there and found 3D printers. So I go to my boss and I'm like, hey, can we buy a 3D printer? It's $1,000. He's like, I don't know. I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. I can figure this out. It's like, all right, fine. So I bought a 3D printer. I couldn't hook up to the network because the network would freak out and probably
Right,
shut the whole
right.
base. So I had it in my office. I had my personal MacBook next to it, and I'm here taking a real piece of these, measuring all of this stuff. And I'm like crazy math trying to figure out circles and cylinders and got a micrometer. And anyways, long story short, I 3D designed a file for this and then 3D printed it. We went through hundreds of versions of this thing. And the key was this piece right here, this little, because the old one only went to about here and it was flat. So we made it beveled. So it made, you know, beveled contact.
Contact. Yeah.
And so it could pull the rounds out. And so it was great because we did all that, got it to work, and I got a hold of a guy. He helped me out a whole lot. And we sent it to a milling group out of Fort Meade, and they no Fort Eustis, sorry, Fort Eustis, and they 3D milled them. So, and then later on we put it into the Army supply system called the GCSS Army. It's a global stock something, and so you can type in the NSN and it tells that printer in Fort Eustis to make one, and then it'll ship it to you. But there's
That's
only
really
10,
cool.
there's only 10 guns in the Army that use that. So it's it's a lot of work for 10 things, but they to this day they fire whenever they extract a round. It's this little thing that I made. It's kind of a
You should have copyrighted that.
yeah. They frown upon copywriting things when you're in uniform doing your official duties. So it's but it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot doing that, and I had a guest recently talking about risk, you know, and when you're in a position like that, even if it's in the mid late 80s, there's inherent risk with designing software and getting it wrong, or
Hmm.
oh, that somehow that decimal messed up and now we way over did that or way under did that, or and so I always like to ask people that do something that's considered quote unquote risky, which everything in life is risky, but how did you approach that with the idea that, hey, this may not work or I may not be able to follow through?
Yeah, you talk about my business now,
Oh, whenever you
or
designed
just
it, when you
anything.
were doing the software with Sabre, when you're still in, or
Yeah,
later, all the above.
I think I was born from parents that really, instill confidence, I suppose.
Yeah.
I had really good teachers in New York and New Mexico. And I just guess you prepare for risk and you just overcome risk. And if something goes wrong, then you probably were doing something.
Hmm.
If it doesn't go wrong, you probably weren't doing anything at all. So like you said, there's inherent risk in anything. So I was not ever afraid of it. I just tried to always move forward and try to make momentum with it. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I ran a business and ran it from the day one till I sold it. And there was definitely risk involved in it, hard work. A lot of times you have to think about it. Is this really worth it and things like that? But
Hmm.
I think you just stick with what you know.
Yeah, that's good advice. I always try to get get that idea from people of like, you know, you can think about it all day long, but at some point you have to take an action.
You do.
And I think people, what's it called? Is it decision paralysis?
Procrastinate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they say,
Yeah.
oh, this maybe tomorrow. Well, maybe tomorrow, and they just kind of,
And I also respect that. It's not easy. I mean, it's
yeah.
not easy to put yourself out there, especially when, I had to feed my family, pay the mortgage, take care of my kids. So there's some risk involved in it.
Mhm. It's always an interesting thing. What would you say is your kind of your biggest takeaway of your whole career, about a decade plus, and um, if you could do one thing over because it was so much fun, what was it?
Was that in the military now?
Yeah. in your time in
Oh,
the Air Force?
I got to be honest with you. I was really spoiled and extremely blessed to go to the Air Force Academy. Had tremendous leadership, like I said. I was a staff sergeant and I was running a crew of 20 or 30 people, remodeling a bunch of homes. Worked up in the mountains and did some work. It just there was not a shortage of risky and very rewarding things. I mean, we put planes up in the air,
Yeah,
so we mounted B-52s and Thunderbirds and all kinds of things like that. I enjoyed every single tour. So I only had three. I don't know how long you were in, but I only had three, but just absolutely loved it. I don't know that I would have changed anything.
yeah. Have you gotten to go back to the academy and see like those static
Well, I'm
displays?
from Colorado Springs, so I was there
Right,
before, and my
right.
daughter lives there, and my son lives
Okay,
there, and six of my grandkids live there.
okay. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
you got to go
Have you
back and be
been
like,
there?
I've no, well, I've done Colorado Springs. I've been to Fort Carson for about an hour. So
Yeah.
we flew from Fort Sill, and I was a HIMARS unit at Fort Sill, and we flew in.
Okay.
We downloaded launchers, fired rockets across the base, loaded back up, and left. And
Okay.
that's how we woke up here because we fired I think five launchers. Um, at like 7:30 in the morning. And if you've ever been run a high Mars and they fire, everybody hears it. It is, I mean, it's a massive, massive explosion. So it's pretty. We
Yeah.
we 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 did that, and apparently later on Twitter they were like, "What the heck was being fired this morning at 7:30 in the morning?" People were freaking
You did
out.
it down on the range?
Yeah, we did we called it's called a hot panel,
Uh-huh.
where the aircraft or the launchers are never detached officially from the airplane. There's a cable, and so they roll out, they do their aiming stuff, and they'd fire, and then the cable would pull them back in. They'd load the ramp and take off. It's pretty awesome asset. So
Yeah.
we're seeing a whole lot of HIMARS stuff in the news right now, and I'm like, I'm familiar with that. So
Yeah.
it's a really really cool machine. And we have the artillery guys will say, we have MLRS too. I'm like, yeah, it's the track version. It's heavy. It's hard to move. And we don't like tracks. But that's it. That's my whole Colorado. Well, I'll tell you what, I've been to Boulder once. I forgot about that years ago for
Okay.
vacation. But
Hmm.
gosh, that was 20 years ago. I've slept since then.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful area. Um, with the
I
property
love
and stuff.
it.
So what brought you to good old Texas? Excuse me.
So, fell in love early
Oh,
and had a second chance with her and got married or started dating again in
good deal.
2013 and married in 2014. But I've always been a cowboy fan. I went from Colorado Springs having a business where I traveled all over the world. I definitely went from Colorado Springs to Dallas about every single flight because I didn't go through Denver. I flew American and flew through Dallas, but I've always loved Texas.
Yeah, it's 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 the mothership as I call it. So
Yeah, it
until
is. It's very unique.
until you see how big Alaska is, like Texas is. I was in Alaska this past year, and I'm like, holy crap, this place is
It's
huge.
big.
So, um, well, man, this is great. So you have to share kind of a half rule is you have to share like the most ridiculous shenanigan story you've got. So it has to start with so there I was. That's the rule.
I have to share the most ridiculous story.
Yeah, the biggest because like shenanigans because like soldiers of any sort you get four or five of them in a room doing something, shenanigans will follow. You know.
Yeah, you got to remember now, I'm Air Force, so it's much, much different. Well, and I kid around when I say this, but when we go to war, we made sure that there was a hooch, that there was air conditioning, that there was a swimming pool, that we had hot water, and we put some pilots up on a runway and had them fly and take care of everything. So, my thing was bomb damage assessment at the most. Um, I don't think we did anything that was mischievous. Not even really in Korea because Korea was a lot different.
Oh
There
yeah.
was I don't remember it all because it was a while back and it's only for a year, but I am pretty sure there was some South Koreans that committed suicide that went
Mhm.
up missing. They said maybe there was some North Korean infiltrators or whatever happened there. We took that pretty serious there,
Oh yeah.
because he was not a good guy right there at that time. And we'd go on alert, and I know there were nukes there, so they would launch planes with
Yeah,
some deterrent, with it.
yeah.
But I really don't have a story of shenanigans in the
Oh man,
military.
you missed out on all the fun.
I was a clean choir boy.
That was the
And then
best
I never
part.
went to war. So it's exactly what you said. My gosh, I have thought many times about the men and women that came in the 90s and, served 1 year, 10 years, 20 years,
Mhm.
or 30 years. They've been in a constant war every year.
Yeah, that's I remember having a lunch with the commanding general when I was a commander, and it was all the captains and that were in command, and he had this luncheon. He wanted to kind of just, hey, give me some real questions. Let's have a real discussion, instead of like these BS ones we always do that are scripted. And he so I said, what do you see being the biggest change for the Army? Because this is 2018. I was like, we've been at war now for 18 years. And so you literally have a generation that's graduating high school here in a few months that their entire life has been at war.
Right,
The first time in the history of America that we have literally a generation that doesn't know life without war. And
right,
I was like, and also when I came in, we were teaching land navigation with a compass, a map, protractor, the most manual way you can do it. And then you had leaders that were like, you can't trust the GPS, and then through so much usage of GPS when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan and everything, I never plotted a single thing ever. Yeah, and it just magically kind of shifted overnight. And now you have kids coming in. I call them kids because they could be my kid, and which is weird to say out loud, but who don't know life doing anything manually. It's all been
no,
electronic. And so now we're having to revert, and we have senior leaders that like I've kind of had this little bit of half and half, maybe if you're lucky, but they never actually have done, like you had to actually like know how to do land nav back in the 80s.
right,
GPS and Garmin didn't exist. And they had the dagger or the plugger back way back in the day. But it's, between those things and even like radio communications and how it's progressed and changed and we went through three radios in my 12 years of being involved in anything tactical. Like, but you talk to anybody from your generation, particularly, like it was one radio for a long, long time,
sure,
and we didn't have a whole lot of advancement. And I've always thought how that's going to affect future generations of forces. The worst thing about war is the consequences of it, but the best thing about it with, when you have minds like yours and, I live down the street from Raytheon, right? We do. And it's like you have all these companies in Harris that are like, our technology. I mean, we leapfrogged ourselves three or four times in the past 20 plus years because,
we did, and we have,
it was a ballistic vest in '03. It's basically a really thick jacket. And now we have like full on armor basically.
right,
And I don't know, I find all that stuff interesting when you have people that are willing to brainstorm. If you go online, you can find the ends of YouTube that'll show you, all these companies. Everyone's like, I've got an idea for a tactical pencil. And you're like, calm down. If we are that close, something's wrong. We have done messed up
right.
to get close enough to use a pencil. We're not all John Wick out here. But man, this has been a lot of fun. Is there anything you'd like to share or tell? I'm all ears.
Well, I'm going to follow you for sure. I've
Uh,
enjoyed our conversations. Like you said, LinkedIn is an amazing opportunity to just meet people from all over the world. I've
yeah.
always respected my purple brothers and sisters and the other, services. I've always known that the Marines are the first one in at the ground. You've got the Army, you've got the Navy and the Air Force. But no, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, this has been great. I love getting to, thanks for sharing your time on, 'cause it's a unique perspective that I think people forget. It wasn't that long ago that we didn't have a lot of the things we had. And you're just work coming from the side of the civil affairs side of, basic, what's the theory, the triangle of needs. My brain just turned off there. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and like
Hmm.
the basic things of food, water, and shelter, like, that if you don't have it, you realize it really quick. And
Right,
it's like all's good and well until those things don't work, and then you're like, this is miserable, and
right.
there's manuals for those things, and nobody ever reads them. But so, but we'll have to get back together, and I look forward to actually meeting you in person since you're actually relatively close to me, and it'd be a lot of
We
fun.
are. And I thank you for what you do. It's an
Yeah,
interesting story. It's unfortunate
yeah,
why it started, but it's quite a blessing that you've chosen this. And anyone out today that smiled a little bit, we can tell a lot of jokes or just took something a little bit lighter because I'm sure you've got heavy, heavy,
I
you
do.
know,
There's a lot of episodes
podcasts that you
that,
should have that you have to work through and talk
yeah.
through. But I appreciate what you're doing here.
Thank you, Michael. We'll wrap it up from there. And if you haven't subscribed, by all means, please do. I'm on every platform I think that I know of. And we'll see you on the next show. Take care.